Ex-Huskers Thomas Fidone and Isaiah Neyor shine at the NFL Combine. How should you feel about their performances? We discuss next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins.
All right, welcome in, everybody. Happy Monday. It is March. We'll get a taste of all of that this week. Weather is something that we always talk about on this show. So,
of course.
We'll
it's like it has to be a staple of like every radio program, every podcast. Yeah. We live in Nebraska.
Topical. Nothing more topical than the weather. And the weather this week is that we're going to be getting 70-mile-an-hour winds like tomorrow night. So we'll look forward to.
Sounds like a good baseball game. Like a good time for a baseball game. We'll discuss that in the third segment today.
But over the weekend, it wasn't just basketball, which we will get to during this show. The NFL Combine was going on. Nebraska had some representatives at the NFL Combine looking to up their draft stock. And Isaiah Neyor, Thomas Fidone, Ty Robinson, they all had good weeks. All three, I think, improved their stock. Isaiah Neyor is an interesting case. He ran a 4.43 40. He had a 38-inch vertical leap. His relative athlete score was 11th out of more than 3,400 wide receivers that have been evaluated since 1987.
That's nuts.
11th. That means he's one of the best athletes that the Combine has ever seen.
I mean, to put that in perspective, we're not talking about 3,400 wide receivers like who played high school football. This is like 3,400 wide receivers who have been potential NFL draft picks. So
yeah,
Isaiah Neyor, who was an every down player for Nebraska, who was not part of the bowl trip because he had left and then briefly went in the portal. Isaiah Neyor, who dropped the pass against Iowa that could have clinched that game for Nebraska. I don't think that he's done anything with this Combine performance to turn himself into the kind of player you would think would rank 11th out of 3,400 receivers evaluated over the last 40 years. I mean, that would suggest that he's like a first-round pick, and that's not going to happen. Like, he's probably going to be a day 3 pick, don't you think? At 6'4", 218 pounds. He's got all the measurables.
At the back end of the draft, somebody will take a flyer on somebody with that type of athleticism. But in order to be a first day pick or a second day pick, you have to pair that athleticism along with production, which Isaiah Neyor didn't throughout his collegiate career. Speaking of Thomas Fidone, he ran a 4.7 40. He had a 10.6 broad jump, which I believe was first among tight ends in the draft this year. And he was on that relative athlete score. He was rated 78th out of more than 1,200 tight ends that have been evaluated since 1987. So we're talking a top couple percent here of athlete for a tight end that's been evaluated at the NFL Combine. So, I mean, same kind of story, Mitch, right? Not a lot of production. Injuries were a part of his time at Nebraska. Obviously, Neyor was only around Nebraska for a year, Fidone for a few. But they both go to the Combine, and they both really, have a great showing. So what does this mean for their time at Nebraska, for their time going forward? I think we like to do revisionist history pretty much on this day every single year.
Yeah, I have a take on this. And we're going to exclude Ty Robinson from this conversation, who also performed extremely well at the Combine. I will tell you his numbers quickly before we get back to Neyor and Fidone. Robinson ran a 4.83 in the 40 at 288 pounds. He was fastest among all the defensive linemen. He had a 33.5-inch vertical. He had a 4.5-second shuttle. His relative athlete score, this is this is a new thing to me. Like I haven't been familiar with this RAS in past years. I'm sure it's been around, but it seemed to pop onto the radar a lot over the last week. His was 24th out of 1,812 D linemen evaluated over the last 38 years. So, all right, they all did very well.
Right.
To me, the one thing that
production, right? Like he was highly productive.
The one thing at Nebraska that you can really bring this back to that I think matters to the people who are listening to this podcast and want to see Nebraska turn great athleticism into great production is that this is validation that Nebraska has a strength and conditioning program in place to put these players in the spot to perform. At some point, it's up to them and it's up to their coaches to be able to turn that into performance. But what Corey Campbell is doing with these guys is outstanding. Now, Isaiah Neyor, you're not going to the strength and conditioning program at Nebraska did not make his arms longer. Fidone has certain athletic traits that were not created in that Nebraska strength and conditioning lab. But none of these guys could have done this when they came out of high school. And I would say Neyor probably wasn't doing this a year ago, coming off injury, 2 seasons of injury, and not playing at Texas. The work they did in Lincoln put them in position to have the kinds of combines that they did. So that's only half the battle for Nebraska. It has to then do it like Ty Robinson did on the field. But you have to feel good about what Corey Campbell and his staff in that new, beautiful weight room are turning out, because all 3 of these guys turned heads in big ways.
Yeah, I'll have you. I'm sure people have noticed that the one player who was able to parlay the athleticism with the production just so happened to play defense, and these other 2 happened to play offense. I think that's notable. I like, to make it a big picture thing for Nebraska here. This is one of my least favorite things that we do every year. We take these combine results, and every year Nebraska has a few players that are invited to the combine, and they always generally perform well. And then they go to the draft, and maybe not those same guys, or whatever. They go to NFL. Nebraska players go to the NFL draft. They get drafted, and then they have relatively successful NFL careers for what you think they might be. Like, this happens every single year. And then what we do is we have revisionist history based on what they do with the combine, or what they do in the NFL, or how high they get drafted, about their careers at Nebraska. And we say, well, why didn't they take, more advantage of those players? And I think there's an argument to be had there, but we do the same thing every year. I think the bottom line is this type of thing. We're going to look back and wonder about guys who get drafted high or have successful combines or whatever. As long as Nebraska is not winning football games, it's going to keep happening, because it's a symptom of it, right? Nebraska is known now as a program who takes players and doesn't get the most out of them. And there's a lot of there's a lot of arms to Neyor and Fidone, right? Like, both injured. Nayor's only here for a year. Like, the offensive coordinator was a huge question mark for the last 2 years, right? Nebraska's offense just flat out wasn't good, right? So, like, there's a lot of stuff, and then there's their side of it too. So, like, there's a lot to it, but I don't know. The bottom line here to me is Nebraska's been a place where they haven't gotten the most out of their best players, seemingly for a long time. And that's unfortunate, because, and Nebraska keeps not winning.
I'd add to that. Speaking of revisionist history, I don't want to group Fidone and Neyor in the same bucket, because they're different kinds of players and had completely different careers at Nebraska. Neyor was in Lincoln for 1 year and got off to a fast start, and then just kind of fizzled as the year went along. Fidone busted his butt to be healthy after 2 ACL injuries, and was a guy who was in Lincoln for 4 seasons. And while it was up and down in his last year, we're going to remember that he didn't score a touchdown in his final season at Nebraska, which is I think just kind of an anomaly. Like, he performed, like, his performance overall should have equated to 3 or 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He also fought, And he did not give up on his teammates. The opposite, in fact, at the end, where Neyor was off looking at other options in December. Thomas Fidone was coming back from a situation where Dana Holgorsen sat him on the bench at the end of the regular season, and he came back and gave everything he had in the bowl game. So I think to group them in the same category and say, hey, it was a tough finish for those guys at Nebraska, or they underperformed. That's not fair to Thomas Fidone. You're going to look back, if he is a productive NFL player, you're going to look back at his career stats at Nebraska and say, man, could Nebraska have gotten more out of that guy? But I think you have to consider the whole situation, that he had the 2 injuries and spent a lot of time coming back from those. There was a head coaching change. There was an offensive coordinator situation that was in flux. At the very end of his Nebraska career, he endured another change at offensive coordinator and had to overcome some things. I mean, Thomas had some struggles on the perimeter blocking, like a lot of people did at Nebraska here in 2024. But he was there at the end, standing up, making plays in the Pinstripe Bowl. So, he deserves from Nebraska, I think, from Nebraska fans, all of their support. Not that Isaiah Neyor doesn't. Like, people have different tracks to their careers, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens with these guys, not just in the draft, but as they go through their careers. And Nebraska's going to have its pro day on March 25th. You'll see those guys there. I wouldn't imagine that those 3 are going to do anything workout related at the pro day. Certainly Tommy Hill, that's a big day for him, coming off that foot injury, didn't work out at the combine. And then guys like Nash Hutmaker, who didn't get invited to the combine, is another player who I'm sure will test very well. Like, if he'd have been at the combine, he'd have probably been in their category in as far as how he compared to other athletes.
Yeah, I agree. So I think there's a lot of arms to that conversation, that's for sure. And something that's not going to stop until Nebraska wins some football games here. So we'll be back. We have Nebraska basketball on the other side. Nebraska baseball. We'll touch on them as well. A little better and a little different tone there, but losing 2 out of 3. All right, back after this.
A message right now from Roy. So attention, Locked On Nebraska fans. The future of college sports is here. Before the Roy app, that's ROY, you had NIL negotiations, NIL, that happened under the table. The fans did not have a clear way to directly support the athletes they love. And now with Roy, you get to be part of the change. You get to support your favorite college athletes in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NIL app, allows you to choose the player you want to support. You get to decide how much to contribute. You receive exclusive content from the athletes you back. If your player transfers, don't worry, you get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. The Roy app is giving fans control. No more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and the future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app from the App Store today. Start backing Nebraska athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. All right, welcome back. Segment number 2 of this Monday episode of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me as always. Tough weekend for the Huskers in competition. Nebraska baseball is officially off to a bad start. Connor, Huskers lost 2 of 3 in Frisco, Texas. They had a 5-0 lead on Saturday against LSU, couldn't hold it, and then lost to Kansas State on Sunday after the win on Friday against Sam Houston. So if Nebraska had beaten LSU, if they'd been able to hold on and win that game, I think we'd be having a much different conversation here, because even at they'd be 5-5. You'd have a win against Vanderbilt. You'd have a win against LSU. Now it's 4-6. You've had a couple losing weekends consecutively after the opener, which had some promise. But they come home and Will Bolt's team has got to get things together. It's unfortunate for the Big Ten. We'll finish on this. We'll pick up a little bit of baseball talk in the next segment, but it's unfortunate in the Big Ten that these series that you play in February and March are so important to the postseason. Like Nebraska just put a major dent with its performance the last couple of weeks, especially in its hopes to be able to host a regional way down the road in June. They've played 10 games and now they're kind of behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, it is. But it's life in the Big Ten Conference. It's never been a great situation for Nebraska baseball in the Big Ten Conference. But they'll have to make do, and we'll see if they have like I said, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but we'll see if they're able to squeeze in some games this week with the weather that we have coming.
Nebraska basketball lost 67-65 on Saturday. Cover your eyes, against Minnesota at PBA. So the Huskers, maybe you've heard this story before. They were down 19 in the second half, came all the way back to take the lead on a couple occasions. Juwan Gary tipped in a Bryce Williams miss with about 8 seconds to play, gave Nebraska the lead, 65-64. But Brennan Grigsby, Minnesota, a bench player, yes, Grigsby, nails a corner three with 4.1 seconds left, and that was it. So Nebraska loses 17-12 overall, 7-11 in the Big Ten. They're just one game out of missing a spot in the 15-team Big Ten tournament. Nebraska plays Tuesday night at Ohio State, finishes at home this weekend against Iowa.
Yeah, that boy Brennan Rigsby was hooping.
Rigsby, sorry.
Yeah, he was hooping. He was shushing people. He was waving goodbye to people.
I don't even know his name.
Brennan Rigsby. He was enjoying his time at Pinnacle Bank Arena. A guy who's just, his minutes have been a little light lately. He transferred in from Oregon last year, and he gets a good spot to come in and shoot a bunch of threes and scores 20 points against Nebraska. It's amazing to me that Nebraska can, we talk about them like this and we're like, oh man, we can't trust them. And we don't know what we're going to get on a game by game basis. And then the players talk about the same thing after the game. They're just like, we got to put it together for 40 minutes. And then they don't every single game. It's mind-numbingly frustrating. It has to be, if you're a Nebraska basketball fan, to sit there and watch it. I don't know how good this team is, even if they do play hard all the time, but they don't play hard all the time. They don't play to their capabilities all the time. And you don't have to do that every single minute of every single game, but you can't go through wide swaths of Big Ten conference games with your season on the line multiple times and play like crap. And that's Nebraska's undone themselves. With that being said, they still have a chance to go to the NCAA tournament. Still, their backs are against the wall here a little bit, but my goodness, it's hard to believe that they'll be able to put anything consistent together in the last 2 games of the regular season or in the Big Ten tournament. Yeah,
this is very much not looking like a tournament team. In spite of the quad 1 wins and the 4 wins against ranked teams, you need to be real about what we're seeing right now. And they've lost 3 straight at home and 5 games at home since mid-January after winning 20 consecutively at Pinnacle Bank Arena. So something's wrong in the DNA of this team. I think this is a discussion that we'll have for sure in depth after the season, because it's not just a basketball discussion. It's a conversation about college sports right now and how you build a roster. And we've been talking about this with Nebraska football since December, in the way that they put together a roster and how the resources impact all of that. Well, it's a different deal for Fred Hoiberg in what he has to do to piece things together in the offseason. I mean, just football and basketball by themselves are different animals, but he's not in a position, Hoiberg, where he can go to the athletic director now here in this new environment of revenue sharing and say, yeah, hey, I need an extra $1 million, or to be able to go to the collective and say that, unless he's got some donor teed up who wants to buy a point guard. It's tough. And when you're already somewhat under-resourced in comparison to maybe the top 20 to 30 programs in the country, and then you've got to put a roster together that's full of transfers and make that work to form a team that can play together in these kind of situations and give you the kind of performance you need in a game like we saw Saturday, where the season's basically on the line. Man, he's got a tough task. And I'm not meaning to like take all of the pressure off or all of the responsibility off of Fred Hoiberg and say, well, he's dealt a tough hand. No, I mean, he still is a coach in the Big Ten at a rich within a rich athletic department, but Nebraska basketball and other sports in the athletic department are not all created the same. So that's maybe a little deeper than I wanted to go on that money discussion right now with basketball, but we'll get more into it later. I just think it's a tough spot they're in. And, it's almost like they're just playing it out at this point. Yeah, they can go win against Ohio State and beat Iowa and make the NCAA tournament. But like, who really thinks that's likely this week?
Yeah. As far as like big picture, I mean, don't overreact to this. Like, Nebraska's going to have a winning season. They're going to go to a postseason tournament, and it might not be it might not have been an enjoyable roller coaster ride that we have all been on this year. But like, you don't have to throw the whole thing away just because it fizzled down the stretch here. Like, I know there's always that conversation. It's crazy to me.
They're definitely not like making a program altering change here. Like, I mean, it's no.
You roll when you're built on the transfer portal the way that Nebraska has been and will be. Like, you're going to be at the mercy a little bit to what you get, and that is not only from an athlete standpoint. That is not only from positional depth, whatever you have or you don't have this year, but it's also from a personality standpoint, right? How do the chemistry sort of mix together? What's your leadership structure look like? And sometimes that's not very clear until, you kind of become who you are like 2 or 3 months into a college basketball season, or even into February and into March. And what Nebraska has become right now is hopefully not the truest version of itself, but man, usually the truth does reveal itself in late February and into March. And this is when Nebraska's fizzled out.
Yeah, I think there'll be a danger for this in years ahead, and that's the thing that's kind of frightening about this is that when you're not going to change the way that you put your team together, like just the fundamental nature of it, there's always going to be a risk that something like this happens, so a higher risk than what you may have had in a previous era or with a program that has a different way of roster construction. All right, that's enough on the sad state of Nebraska's basketball team at this moment. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the weather and what it means for this week in Nebraska sports. That's next.
All right, but first, a word from our friend from the FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA action, it's just getting underway. In fact, it's starting to get to be time to turn your attention that way a little bit. No better place to get in on that action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Whether you're new or you have been watching the entire year, you could place live bets throughout the games. Even if you missed the opening tip-off, it doesn't matter. You're not too late. And you could do a live same-game parlay as well, so you could still get those beautiful, beautiful odds even after the game has tipped off. Live betting feature, it is fantastic. I like to take a look at long-term bets as well. Maybe you got a lead on who's going to make the finals or win the finals at this point. Whatever you want to do, however you want to slice it, head to FanDuel.com and join today. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Once again, FanDuel.com and join today. FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back. It is the final segment here on a Monday Locked On Nebraska podcast. I know we talk about Nebraska athletics mostly on this podcast, but let's go up to Omaha a little bit and talk about the Mavericks. A quick congratulations and a hearty congratulations out to them. They won the Summit League title outright. They beat Oral Roberts. They're the 1 seed in the Summit League tournament, and they are hoping to go to the NCAA tournament for the first time since moving to Division I. And I'll add, Mitch, that their chancellor hid in a trash can and jumped out of it during the celebration of the Mavericks winning the Summit League title, which was amazing.
Did he? I missed that. I'm sure it was on social media. That's amazing. The trash can thing has been super cool. They had some wrestlers in the locker room last week who I had no idea who they were. I'm not sure if they knew who they were, but they were there, and that was fun. The Mavs need to win a couple games in Sioux Falls. Like when you're in the Summit League, Nebraska fans, you have to win the conference tournament in order to get to the NCAA tournament. So despite this great season, like they have to go up to Sioux Falls and do some work. Possibility is, are they on the same side of the bracket as St. Thomas? What seed did St. Thomas get? Because if they were to meet in the finals, UNO would have an automatic bid since St. Thomas is not eligible for the NCAA tournament.
St. Thomas did end up being the 2, so they are on opposite side.
It could happen. Good. Yeah, we'd love to see UNO in the Omaha in the NCAA tournament this year. That would be fantastic to see. I saw some UNO. I went to UNO hockey on Friday night. My wife and daughter were out of town, so Zach and I hit up the Mavs at Baxter Arena with the ice on the floor. Saw them play Hockey Power Arizona State.
Yep.
And went down, but then the Mavs came back and won that game on Saturday. So that's fun. Good thing to do around town this weekend. What'd you do?
That's always funny. Fun to say. Arizona State Hockey Power. If they could create a Hockey Power in the desert, then more power to them.
You know what? I was looking that up during the game. I'm like, how long has Arizona State had a program? And it was like 1983. They're a long time hockey program. And I mean, you're talking about Phoenix, where the NHL exists, and it makes some sense on that level. But anyway, that's not what our show's about.
Yeah, it's more about Nebraska, although we stray off the beaten path from time to time. You
have a good weekend?
I did. I didn't do a whole lot of anything, which was necessary. And that was important. So we're around the time of year now where the weather is going to be really important to watch. I mean, you thought we talked about weather before. Wait till now, because the local baseball teams will be back, or are scheduled to be back this week. Mother Nature might have other plans, but yeah.
Nebraska is scheduled to play, as of this moment, on Tuesday at 5 p.m. at Tal Anderson Field in Omaha against the aforementioned Omaha Mavericks. That game will not be played at 5 p.m. I don't know if they can try to move it up earlier in the day, or if it's just going to get moved to become part of a doubleheader later in the season, or scratched from the schedule altogether. But the Mavs have wins against Kansas and LSU the last couple of weekends, and some losses against those teams also. But so they're somewhat formidable for the local scene. It is going to snow on Tuesday night, and more notably, the wind is going to blow like 60 plus miles an hour. So we're looking at a blizzard on Tuesday into Wednesday. I am not at all happy about this. If you have things out in your yard or connected to your property that could blow away or could blow over, like get that taken fix that. Get that taken into account here over the next 24 to 30 hours.
Yeah, any deck furniture, stuff like that. Like, just I'm going to go out there this afternoon or tomorrow morning and just start laying stuff down and bringing everything I can inside. It's pretty wild. And so, yes, it will likely prevent us from having baseball in the coming days. Maybe we warm up enough to get some baseball around here this weekend. All 3 of our local baseball programs are in action at home this weekend, including Nebraska, who opens the Big Ten this weekend with Washington, which is a sentence indeed.
Yeah, in the SEC, they don't open conference play for a couple more weeks. So I guess the SEC is it's a totally different environment. I wrote up the college baseball weekend in review. You can check that out on The Athletic. Maybe Nebraska will make an appearance in there at some point this year. But all kinds of fun stuff that happened around the sport of college baseball this weekend. And I got to kind of do our roundup. And I had a blurb on Oklahoma, which is undefeated and could enter SEC play in a couple of weeks at 16-0. So interesting that the SEC teams hold off until the middle of March, while Nebraska and Washington will be duking it out in the in the remnants of a blizzard at Haymarket Park. I don't know that they can play on Friday. It's supposed to still be pretty chilly, but the weekend looks okay. So I think you can probably safely cancel Nebraska's game against South Dakota State that's scheduled for Wednesday in Lincoln. Also, I don't have a good feeling about that game, but we could see the Huskies and the Huskers. This would be, of course, Washington's Big Ten debut.
Yeah,
welcome.
Elsewhere.
Welcome to the Big Ten.
I know, but the thing is, like, we've had 65-degree weekends in the first weekend of March, and they've been in Arizona or whatever, and we've been thinking, well, why aren't they playing here? This is perfect day. So you just, like, you're rolling the dice. It's
like this last weekend. Yeah, I could have played at home. Yeah.
Elsewhere, Nebraska women's basketball closed the regular season with a win over Northwestern. They are the 10 seed in the Big Ten tournament. So that, unfortunately, what you get for going 10-8 in the league is playing on the first day of the Big Ten tournament. But on the positive side, they are likely headed to the NCAA tournament. They got 19 wins. They got Britt Prince back as well. So things are looking up for Amy Williams' crew, and we'll see how they roll this week in Indy and then beyond, which, like I said, they should be headed to the NCAA tournament.
Yep. You can finish 10th. You can get the 10 seed in the Big Ten.
It's amazing.
Still make the NCAA. So they've had a productive, good season considering the injuries early that did not entirely derail that season for Nebraska. Good for them. We'll see how things go in Indy. We're going to hear on Tuesday from the remaining new hires on Matt Rule's coaching staff who did not visit with the media last week. That would be special teams coordinator Mike Eckler, secondary coach Addison Williams, defensive line coach Terry Braden. So over the next couple of days, we'll get more into what to expect from those guys when they take the podium. Will it be as entertaining and interesting as last week when we talked to the Phils and also DeKeel Shorts? I don't know. I think that this has some potential.
Oh, we got Eckler. I mean, if he doesn't come through for us, then it's going to be tough to probably equal it. No, I don't know. Like, I don't know how crowd pleasing the press conferences were last week, but Eckler will definitely bring something to the table. No doubt about
fine.
it.
When you haven't heard any official football talk from like representatives inside the program for like a month or somewhat close to that, and then you get 3 assistant coaches. That's fantastic. And I Eckler should get like 20 minutes tomorrow, and then they should have Williams and Braden for 5 to 7. Now, maybe one of those two is going to surprise us and be a big personality, and their jobs, of course, are very important, coaching the secondary and the D line. But Eckler's he's got the history with Nebraska, and he's definitely going to be good for a few sound bites. We'll bring some on Wednesday's show. We'll promise to bring some video and audio of Coach Eck speaking to the Husker Nation.
That is, of course, if we have not blown away by then. All right, that's the setup for the week. Appreciate you guys being with us. We'll have plenty to come throughout the week. Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. For your second listen, you could check out Locked On College Basketball. Don't wait for March. You can be the most informed college basketball fan right now. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.